The stars were quiet that night. Ethan Cole sat alone in the cockpit of his cargo ship, watching the endless darkness of space through the front window. He was a simple man, 43 years old, with tired eyes and gray hair at the sides of his head. His ship was old and slow, carrying food and medicine to a small human colony on the edge of known space. Ethan had been a pilot for 20 years. He liked the quiet of space. He liked being alone with his thoughts. He did not like trouble, and he always tried to avoid it. That was what everyone who knew him would say. Ethan Cole was a peaceful man. A weak man, some would add. A man who would never fight back. But tonight, trouble found him anyway. The alarm on his control panel started screaming. Ethan sat up straight and looked at the screen. A ship was coming toward him, moving fast. Very fast. It was not a human ship. The shape was wrong. It looked like a giant insect, with long legs that stretched out from its body and a head that glowed with strange blue lights. Ethan knew what it was. Everyone in this part of space knew about the Vexery. They were an ancient race of insect-like creatures who had conquered 100 worlds. They took prisoners and made them work in their mines until they died. They showed no mercy to anyone. Ethan's hands moved over the controls. He tried to change direction, tried to run, but his ship was too slow. The Vexery vessel was 10 times faster and 100 times bigger. Within minutes, it was right next to him, so close that he could see the patterns of light moving across its living hull. A voice came through his radio. It was not really a voice. It was a series of clicks and hisses that his translator turned into words. Human vessel. You will stop your engines. You will prepare to be boarded. If you resist, you will die. Ethan looked at the weapons panel. He had one small gun mounted on the front of his ship. It would do nothing against the Vexery. Fighting would only get him killed faster. He turned off his engines. The Vexery ship attached itself to his vessel like a parasite. He heard the sound of metal cutting through metal as they made a hole in his hull. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, clicking footsteps that echoed through his ship. The door to his cockpit was ripped from its frame. 3 Vexery warriors stood there, each one 7 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in hard black armor that was part of their own skin. Their heads had large compound eyes that reflected the light like broken mirrors. Their mouths were surrounded by sharp mandibles that clicked together when they breathed. Ethan raised his hand slowly. I surrender, he said. I am not armed. I will not fight. The warriors looked at each other. One of them made a sound that might have been laughter. This is the human? It asked. This soft, small creature? Take him, another said. The Queen will want to see him. They grabbed Ethan by the arms and dragged him through his own ship, then into theirs. The inside of the Vexery vessel was warm and wet. The walls were not made of metal. They were made of something organic, something that pulsed with life. Ethan felt sick as they pulled him through corridors that smelled like rotting fruit. They threw him down in a large room. The floor was soft and warm under his hands. When he looked up, he saw her. Queen Zadara was 3 times the size of her warriors. Her body was long and segmented, covered in armor that shone like polished stone. She sat on a throne that seemed to be made of living flesh, connected to her own body by tubes and wires. Her eyes were huge, taking up most of her face, and they stared at Ethan with cold curiosity. So, she said, her voice coming from a device in her chest, this is a human. Ethan stayed on the floor, his head down. He did not speak. I have heard stories about your species, the Queen continued. They say you are clever. They say you are dangerous. But look at you. You are nothing. A small, soft thing with no armor, no claws, no poison. How did your kind ever survive? We are peaceful, Ethan said quietly. We do not want war. The Queen laughed. It was an ugly sound, like stones grinding together. Peaceful, she repeated. Yes, I can see that. You did not even try to fight my warriors. You fell on your knees like a beaten animal. She leaned forward, her mandibles clicking inches from his face. Your species is weak. You will make good slaves. Ethan said nothing. He kept his eyes on the floor, his breathing slow and steady. Take him to the labor pits, Zithara ordered. Put him with the other prisoners. We will see how long this one lasts before he breaks. The warriors grabbed Ethan again and dragged him away. As they pulled him through the corridors, one of them spoke. You are lucky the queen did not kill you here. She usually kills the weak ones for sport. I am grateful for her mercy, Ethan said softly. The warrior laughed again. Mercy? There is no mercy in the pits. You will work until your body fails. Then you will die. That is all that awaits you, human. They threw him into a small transport ship with a dozen other prisoners. There were creatures of many different species, all of them looking tired and afraid. No one spoke. There was nothing to say as the ship took off and headed toward the Vexery homeworld. Ethan sat in the corner and closed his eyes. The warriors thought he was sleeping. The other prisoners thought he was giving up, but Ethan was not sleeping. He was thinking. Behind his right ear, hidden under his skin, was a small device. It was a neural implant, so advanced that no scanner could detect it. For 3 years, Ethan had been waiting for this moment. He was not really a cargo pilot. He was one of 12 operatives sent by human intelligence to infiltrate Vexery territory and learn their secrets. The other 11 had been captured and killed. Ethan was the last one. And now he was exactly where he needed to be. He allowed himself a small smile, so small that no one could see it. The Vexery thought they had captured a weak and helpless man. They thought he would break in their minds like all the others. They were wrong. Ethan Cole had a mission, and he would complete it, no matter how long it took, no matter how much he had to suffer. The Vexery had made a terrible mistake. When they brought him to their homeworld, they just did not know it yet. The transport ship flew through the darkness of space, carrying its cargo of prisoners toward a world of fire and chains. And in the corner, the human sat quietly, planning, waiting, and remembering every detail of everything he saw. The hunt had begun. But the Vexery were not the hunters. They were the prey. The Vexery homeworld was a planet of fire and stone. From space, it looked like a burning coal, with rivers of lava running across its surface and clouds of smoke rising from 1,000 volcanoes. The air was thick with poison, and the ground was always hot. The transport ship landed near a mountain that had been cut open like a wound. Inside the mountain was the labor pit, a network of tunnels and caves that went deep into the heart of the planet. Thousands of prisoners lived and died in those tunnels, mining the rare minerals that powered the Vexery war machine. When Ethan stepped out of the ship, the heat hit him like a wall. His lungs burned with every breath. The ground was so hot that he could feel it through his boots. All around him, he could see prisoners being marched into the mountain, their heads down, their bodies thin and broken. A Vexery overseer grabbed his arm and pushed him forward. Move, it said. You work now. You stop. You die. Ethan walked into the darkness of the mine. The first month was the hardest. Ethan worked 16 hours a day, digging rocks from the walls of the tunnels and carrying them to the processing stations. The work was backbreaking. The food was barely enough to keep him alive. The water tasted like metal and made his stomach hurt. Many prisoners died in that first month. Some died from the heat. Some died from the gas that leaked from the rocks. Some simply gave up and stopped eating. The Vexery did not care. There were always more prisoners to replace the dead. But Ethan did not die. He did not give up. Every day, he woke up before the others and ate his small portion of food. Every day, he worked his full shift without complaint. Every night, he went to sleep and dreamed of home. And every moment, every day. He watched. He watched the guards and learned their patrol patterns. He watched the overseers and learned their weaknesses. He watched the tunnels and memorized every turn, every dead end, every hidden passage. The neural implant behind his ear recorded everything, storing information that would one day help his people destroy the Vex-Ari. In his second month, Ethan met Sela. Sela was a Corvani, a reptilian species from a world on the other side of the galaxy. She had green scales that had turned gray from years in the mines. Her eyes were yellow and tired. She had been a soldier once, captured in a battle that her people had lost. "You are the human," she said one evening, sitting next to him in their shared cell. "I have heard about you." "What have you heard?" Ethan asked. "That you work without complaining. That you do not cry at night like the new prisoners. That you speak to the guards with respect and never give them reason to beat you." Sela tilted her head, studying him. "Some say you have accepted your fate. Others say you are a coward who is too afraid to fight." Ethan shrugged. "What do you say?" Sela was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "I say there is something strange about you, human. I have been in these pits for 5 years. I have seen hundreds of prisoners come and go. The ones who accept their fate become empty inside. They stop caring about anything. But you are not empty. Your eyes are still alive. You are still thinking, still planning." Ethan looked at her without speaking. "You are waiting for something," Sela continued. "I do not know what it is, but I can see it in the way you watch everything, the way you remember every detail. You are not a slave in your mind. You are something else." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice very soft. "Can I trust you? I am a prisoner, same as you. I hate the Vexari more than anything in this universe. They killed my family, my friends, my entire unit. If you are planning something, I want to be part of it." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then listen carefully and tell no one what I am about to say." He told her the truth. He was not a simple cargo pilot. He was an operative, sent by human intelligence to gather information about the Vexari. 11 others had been sent before him. All of them had been discovered and killed. Ethan was the last one, and he had succeeded where the others had failed. "I have a device in my head," he explained. "It records everything I see and hear. When the time comes, I will send all this information to the human fleet. They will use it to attack the Vexari where they are weakest." Sela's eyes went wide. "You are planning an invasion?" "Not just an invasion. A complete destruction of the Vexari war machine. But I need more time. I need to learn more about this planet, about their defenses, about everything. And I need help." "What kind of help?" "I need people I can trust. Prisoners who are strong enough to fight when the time comes. Prisoners who can help me explore the tunnels and find the weak points in the Vexari defenses." Sela was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled, showing her sharp teeth. "I know many prisoners who would die for a chance to fight back. Give me time, and I will find them for you." Over the next year, Ethan and Sela built a network of trusted allies. They moved carefully, always in secret, never giving the Vexari any reason to suspect them. They shared food with the weak and protected the helpless. They earned respect and loyalty, one small act at a time. Ethan learned that the labor pits were much larger than he had thought. There were hundreds of tunnels, some of them forgotten by the Vexari for centuries. He explored these hidden passages during his rest periods, mapping them in his mind and storing the information in his implant. He also learned about the Vexari themselves. He studied their bodies and found their weak points. Their armor was strong, but there were gaps at the joints. Their eyes were sensitive to bright light. Their communication depended on a central system that could be disrupted. Every piece of information was another weapon in the war to come dot at the end of his second year in the pits. Ethan had gathered more intelligence than all the other operatives combined. He knew the location of every guard station, every power generator, every defensive weapon. He knew how many warriors the Vexery had and where they were stationed. He knew the weaknesses of their queen and the layout of her palace. He was ready. All he needed now was the signal dot, and somewhere in the darkness of space, Lieutenant Maya Torres was coming to bring it. The reconnaissance ship Horizon moved through space like a shadow. It was small and fast, built for stealth rather than fighting. Its hull was covered with special materials that made it invisible to most sensors. Inside, a crew of 20 worked in silence, watching their screens and waiting for something they had been searching for during 3 long years. Lieutenant Maya Torres stood at the center of the bridge, her arms crossed over her chest. She was a tall woman with dark hair tied back in a tight braid and eyes that never seemed to rest. She had been a soldier for 15 years, but this mission was different from anything she had done before. Anything? She asked, looking at her communications officer. Nothing yet, the officer replied. We are still scanning all frequencies. Maya nodded and turned back to the main screen. It showed a map of Vexery space, a vast area of stars and planets that no human ship had ever entered safely. Somewhere in that darkness, 12 operatives had been sent to gather intelligence. 11 of them had gone silent years ago. Only one signal remained, faint and irregular, like a heartbeat that was slowly fading. Ethan Cole. Maya had never met him, but she felt like she knew him. She had read his file 100 times. A quiet man. A patient man. A man who could wait years for the right moment to act. Lieutenant, the communications officer said suddenly, sitting up straight in his chair. I have something. A signal, very weak, coming from the Vexery homeworld. Maya was at his side in an instant. Is it him? The officer studied his screen, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. The signature matches. It is Cole. He's alive. A wave of relief washed over Maya. 3 years of searching, 3 years of hoping, and finally they had found him. Can we communicate with him? Not directly. His implant is designed for one-way transmission only. He can send data to us, but we cannot send messages back in the same way. The officer paused. However, we can send the activation code. It will trigger his implant to upload all stored data and prepare for extraction. Maya looked at the map on the main screen. The Vexery homeworld was deep inside enemy territory, protected by hundreds of warships and defensive platforms. Getting a fleet there would take time and careful planning. Contact Admiral Santos, she ordered. Tell him we have found our man, and tell him to bring everything we have. 2 days later, the human fleet gathered at the edge of Vexery space. 32 warships, carrying thousands of soldiers and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Admiral Santos was an old man with white hair and scars on his face from battles fought long ago. He had been fighting the enemies of humanity for 50 years, and he had never lost a war. Show me what we are dealing with, he said, standing on the bridge of his flagship. Maya brought up the display. This is the Vexery homeworld. Population estimated at 2 billion. Defensive fleet of approximately 100 warships. Ground forces unknown but believed to be in the millions. The Admiral studied the map. And our man is down there? Yes, sir. In the labor pits beneath the surface. He's been gathering intelligence for 3 years. Once we send the activation code, his implant will upload everything he has learned. What kind of intelligence? Patrol routes. Defensive positions. Weak points in their infrastructure. Everything we need to hit them hard and fast. Santos nodded slowly. And can we trust this information? He has been a prisoner for 3 years. How do we know he has not been turned? Maya shook her head. I know his type, Admiral. Ethan Cole is not the kind of man who breaks. He would die before betraying his people. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his tactical officer. Prepare the fleet for combat operations. We jump in 18 hours. On the Vexery homeworld, deep in the darkness of the mines. Ethan Cole felt the signal dot. It came as a small pulse of energy, transmitted through his neural implant directly into his brain. There were no words, no images, just a simple command that he had been waiting 3 years to receive. Prepare for extraction. The fleet is coming. Ethan opened his eyes. Around him, the other prisoners were sleeping in their cells, exhausted from another day of hard labor. The guards were patrolling the tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. Everything was normal. Everything was quiet. But everything was about to change. Ethan moved silently through the shadows, making his way to the cell where Sella slept. He touched her shoulder gently, and she woke instantly, her hand going to the sharp rock she kept hidden under her blanket. It is time, Ethan whispered. Sella's eyes went wide. The signal? The fleet will be here in 18 hours. We need to prepare. Sella nodded and rose from her bed. Together, they moved through the tunnels, waking their trusted allies one by one. There were 50 of them now, prisoners from a dozen different species. All of them ready to fight and die for a chance at freedom. They gathered in a hidden chamber deep in the mines, a place that Ethan had discovered months ago. The Vexery had forgotten about it centuries before. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting. Listen carefully, Ethan said, standing before the group. The human fleet is coming. In 18 hours, they will attack the Vexery homeworld. But they cannot win alone. They need our help. A Torvani male named Crow, whose species had been conquered by the Vexery a century ago, stepped forward. What can we do? We are prisoners. We have no weapons, no armor. We have something better, Ethan replied. We have knowledge. I have spent 3 years mapping these tunnels. I know where every guard station is. I know where the power generators are. I know the weak points in the Vexery defenses. He looked around at the faces before him, seeing hope and fear in equal measure. When the fleet attacks, the Vexery will send their warriors to defend the surface. The mines will be left with only a small guard force. That is when we strike. We take the guard stations. We free the other prisoners. We cut the power to the defensive weapons. And we turn these mines into a fortress that the Vexery cannot recapture. Sella stepped forward, her voice strong. I have fought the Vexery before. I know how they think, how they move. With the information Ethan has gathered, we can defeat them. One by one, the prisoners nodded. They had nothing to lose. They had been dying slowly in these mines for years. Now they had a chance to die fighting. We have 18 hours, Ethan said. Use them wisely. Rest when you can. Prepare your minds for battle. And when the time comes, show the Vexery what happens when they underestimate their prisoners. The group dispersed, moving back to their cells before the guards noticed their absence. Ethan remained in the hidden chamber, sitting alone in the darkness. In 18 hours, everything would change. Either they would be free or they would be dead. There was no middle ground. Ethan closed his eyes and thought of home. He thought of the blue skies of Earth, of the smell of rain, of the faces of friends he had not seen in years. He thought of all the reasons he had agreed to this mission, all the people he was fighting to protect. Then he opened his eyes and began his final preparations. The war was about to begin. The clock was counting down. 12 hours until the fleet arrived. 12 hours until the battle that would decide the fate of millions. Ethan moved through the tunnels like a ghost. He had slept for only 3 hours, but his mind was sharp and focused. Years of training had taught him to function without rest, to push his body beyond its normal limits when necessary. The first step of his plan was simple but dangerous. He needed weapons. The Vexery kept an armory near the main guard station, protected by 4 warriors at all times. Ethan had studied their patterns for months. He knew that at exactly midnight, the guards changed shifts. For 2 minutes, only 2 warriors would be present instead of 4. 2 minutes was all he needed. At midnight, Ethan approached the armory from a side tunnel that the Vexery had forgotten about. He moved without sound, his bare feet making no noise on the warm stone floor. In his hand, he carried a sharp rock, the only weapon he had. The 2 guards stood at the entrance, their backs to the tunnel. They were talking to each other in their clicking language, relaxed and careless. They had been guarding this armory for years, and nothing had ever happened. They did not expect anything to happen now. Ethan struck the first guard at the base of its skull, where the armor was thin. The creature dropped without a sound. Before the second guard could react, Ethan grabbed its head and twisted. There was a crack and the warrior fell beside its companion. 2 minutes. The new guards would arrive in 2 minutes. Ethan ran into the armory. The walls were lined with weapons, energy rifles, shock batons, explosive charges. He grabbed what he could carry and ran back into the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness just as the new guards arrived. They found their comrades on the floor and began to scream. Alarms echoed through the mines. But by then, Ethan was already gone, distributing weapons to his allies in the hidden tunnels. "They know something is wrong," Sela said, taking a rifle from him. "They will search the mines." "Let them search," Ethan replied. "They will not find us. And in 11 hours, it will not matter." The Vexery sent patrols into the deeper tunnels, searching for the prisoners who had attacked the armory. But Ethan knew these tunnels better than the Vexery knew themselves. He led his people through forgotten passages, always staying 1 step ahead of the hunters. While they moved, Ethan explained the plan. The fleet will attack the surface first. The Vexery will send most of their warriors to fight the ships. When that happens, we will strike. Our first target is the power station in Sector 7. Without power, the defensive cannons on the surface will go dark. What about the guards in the mines? Kral asked. There are 300 guards stationed in the labor pits. We have 50 fighters. But most of the guards will be called to the surface when the battle starts. We will be facing maybe 50 or 60. Those are still bad odds, another prisoner said. No, Ethan said firmly. Those are winning odds. We have weapons. We have knowledge. And we have something the Vexery do not have. We have nothing to lose. The hours passed slowly. Ethan and his fighters waited in the darkness, checking their weapons, going over the plan again and again. Some of them prayed to gods that Ethan had never heard of. Others sat in silence, preparing themselves for death. Ethan found Sela sitting alone in a corner, her eyes closed. "Are you ready?" he asked. She opened her eyes and looked at him. "I have been ready for 5 years. Every night, I dreamed of fighting back. Every morning, I woke up and knew I would die without ever seeing my home again." She smiled, showing her sharp teeth. "Today, I get to fight. Whether the first live or die, I will die free." Ethan nodded. He understood. They all understood. Then the mines began to shake. The attack had begun. Far above the surface of the planet. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace and opened fire. 32 warships unleashed a storm of weapons against the Vexery defenses. The sky burned with explosions and energy beams. Ships on both sides were destroyed in seconds. In her throne room, Queen Zithara watched the battle on her screens. Her mandibles clicked with fury as she saw human ships tearing through her fleet. How is this possible? She demanded. They know exactly where to hit us. They know where every defensive platform is positioned. Her generals had no answer. They could only watch as their defenses crumbled. Send all available warriors to the surface, Zidara ordered. Every soldier, every guard. We must hold them back. The order went out across the planet. In the mines, the guards received the command and began running toward the surface exits. Within minutes, the tunnels were nearly empty. Ethan listened to the footsteps fading away. Then he smiled. Now, he said, 50 prisoners emerged from the shadows, weapons in their hands. They moved through the tunnels like an army, taking guard stations one by one. Most of the stations were empty. The few guards who remained were outnumbered and unprepared. Ethan led the attack on the power station. It was a large chamber at the center of the mines, filled with machines that hummed with energy. 10 guards stood at the entrance, their weapons raised. Kill them all, the lead guard ordered, but Ethan was faster. He fired his weapon and dropped the first guard. Sala was right behind him, her rifle blazing. Within seconds, all 10 guards were dead. Crow, set the charges, Ethan ordered. We have 3 minutes before reinforcements arrive. The Tovani male ran to the main generator and placed explosive devices at the key points. Ethan had shown him exactly where to put them, based on his years of observation. Charges set, Crow reported. Everyone out. They ran through the tunnels as fast as they could. Behind them, the charges exploded. The power station was destroyed in a ball of fire. All across the planet, defensive cannons went silent. On the surface, the human fleet saw the lights go out. Admiral Santos smiled grimly. Cold in it, he said. All ships, focus your fire on the main installations. Ground forces, prepare for landing. Transport ships descended through the chaos, carrying thousands of soldiers to the surface. The Battle of Vexor Prime had truly begun. In the mines, Ethan and his fighters continued their attack. They freed prisoners from their cells, adding hundreds to their army. They captured weapon caches and distributed them to anyone who could fight. They blocked tunnels and set traps for any Vexori who tried to return. Underground. By the time the sun rose over the burning planet, the mines belonged to the prisoners. Ethan stood at the entrance of the main tunnel, looking up at the sky. He could see human ships flying overhead, their weapons tearing into the Vexori forces. Ground troops were advancing across the surface, pushing the enemy back toward the Queen's palace. We did it, Sela said, standing beside him. We actually did it. Ethan shook his head. Not yet. The Queen is still alive. The war is not over until she is defeated. He picked up his weapon and looked at his army of freed prisoners. Who wants to help me finish this? He asked. Every hand went up. Together, they marched toward the palace, ready to face the Queen who had thought they were weak, ready to show her just how wrong she had been. The Queen's palace rose from the center of the capital city like a mountain of black stone. Its walls were made of the same living material as the Vexori ships, pulsing with dim light even as the battle raged around it. Defensive cannons on its towers fired at the human ships overhead, but without the main power grid. They were running on backup energy and could not hold out much longer. Ethan led his army of freed prisoners through the burning streets. There were more than 1,000 of them now, fighters from 20 different species, all united by their hatred of the Vexori and their desire for freedom. Human soldiers were advancing from the other side of the city, pushing the Vexori defenders back toward the palace. Lieutenant Torres is requesting communication, Crow reported, holding a radio they had taken from a fallen Vexori. She says the human forces are approaching the palace gates. Ethan took the radio. This is Cole. Tell Lieutenant Torres we are coming from the east. We will meet her forces at the main entrance. A voice came through the static. Cole, this is Torres. I have been looking for you for 3 years. It is good to finally hear your voice. Likewise, Lieutenant. Let us finish this together. The two armies met at the palace gates. Maya Torres was a tall woman in combat armor, her rifle in her hands and her soldiers at her back. When she saw Ethan, she smiled. "You look terrible," she said. "3 years in a mine will do that to you," Ethan replied. "How do we get inside?" Maya pointed at the main doors. They were massive, made of the same organic material as the walls, and sealed tight. "We have been trying to break through for an hour. The material heals itself faster than we can damage it." Ethan studied the doors for a moment. Then he nodded. "There is another way. The palace is connected to the mine network through underground tunnels. The Queen uses them to inspect the labor pits personally. I know where the entrance is. Lead the way." Ethan took a small group through the streets to an old building that looked abandoned. Inside, hidden behind broken machinery, was a tunnel that led downward into darkness. "Stay close," Ethan said. "There may be guards." The tunnel was narrow and dark, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. The walls were wet and warm, and strange sounds echoed from somewhere ahead. After 20 minutes of walking, they emerged into a large chamber beneath the palace. HFY warriors were waiting for them. There were 30 of them. The Queen's elite guard, their armor polished, and their weapons ready. They had been expecting an attack through the underground passages. "Kill the intruders," the lead warrior ordered. The battle was fast and brutal. Energy weapons lit up the darkness as both sides opened fire. Ethan moved through the chaos like a dancer, dodging attacks and striking back with deadly accuracy. Sela was beside him, her rifle never stopping. Maya Torres fought with the skill of a veteran, her soldiers covering her as she advanced toward the enemy line. Human and HFY fell on both sides, but the prisoners kept coming, their rage giving them strength beyond their tired bodies. When the last elite guard fell, Ethan counted the survivors. They had lost 12 fighters, but the path to the Queen was now open. "Up these stairs," Ethan said. "The throne room is at the top." They climbed through the palace, fighting small groups of guards along the way. The building shook as explosions rocked the city outside. The HFY fleet was falling. Their ground forces were retreating. The battle was almost over. At last, they reached the throne room. Queen Zithara sat on her living throne, her massive body connected to the walls by tubes and wires. Her compound eyes reflected the light of 12 fires burning outside her windows. Around her stood her personal bodyguards, the largest and strongest warriors Ethan had ever seen. "So," the Queen said, her voice calm despite the destruction around her. "The human has come to face me at last." Ethan stepped forward, his weapon at his side. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your army is defeated. Your empire is falling. Surrender now, and your life will be spared." Zithara laughed, that same ugly sound like grinding stones. "Surrender? To you? You are nothing, human. A small, weak creature that I kept alive only because killing you seemed like a waste of effort." She leaned forward, her mandibles clicking with contempt. "I have ruled for 500 years. I have conquered 100 worlds. Do you really think a single human can defeat me?" "I am not a single human," Ethan replied. "I am the first." He raised his hand, and his army poured into the throne room. Prisoners from 20 different species, all of them armed, all of them ready to fight. Behind them came Maya Torres and her soldiers, their weapons aimed at the Queen. Zithra's eyes went wide for the first time. She looked at the army before her, at the faces of creatures she had believed were broken, and something changed in her expression. Fear. "You cannot do this," she said, her voice losing its calm. "You are slaves. You are nothing." "That is where you are wrong," Ethan said. "We were never nothing. We were just waiting." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the Queen. For 3 years, I lived in your mines. I ate your terrible food. I breathed your poisoned air. I watched my fellow prisoners die, one by one, while you sat on your throne and laughed at our weakness. He stopped just in front of her, close enough to touch. But you made a mistake. You underestimated us. You thought that because we did not fight, we could not fight. You thought that because we suffered in silence, we had accepted our fate. He shook his head slowly. Humans do not accept fate. We change it. Zidara tried to rise from her throne, but the tubes connecting her to the walls held her in place. Her bodyguards moved to attack, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Within seconds, they were overwhelmed. The queen was alone. "What do you want?" she asked, fear now plain in her voice. "I want you to understand," Ethan said. "I want you to look at me and see what you missed. I was not weak. I was patient. I was not broken. I was waiting. And while you ignored me, I learned everything about your empire. Your defenses. Your weaknesses. Your secrets." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You had 3 years to kill me. You did not think I was worth the trouble. That is the difference between your species and mine. We never underestimate anyone. And we never forget those who underestimate us." Outside, the last Vexery ships were falling from the sky. The battle was over. The human fleet controlled the planet. Maya Torres stepped forward. "Ethan Cole, you are hereby relieved of duty. Welcome home." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time in 3 years, he smiled. A real smile, not the small hidden ones he had allowed himself in the darkness of the mines. "It is good to be home," he said. The queen was taken into custody, her empire dissolved, her power destroyed. The prisoners were freed, all of them, and given transport to their home worlds. The Vexery would never again be a threat to anyone. Weeks later, Ethan stood on the bridge of a human ship, looking out at the stars. Sella stood beside him, her scales slowly regaining their original green color now that she was eating proper food again. "What will you do now?" she asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "I do not know. I have spent 3 years thinking about this mission. Now that it is over, I need to find a new purpose." "You could rest." "You have earned it. Maybe." He paused. "Or maybe I will keep working. There are other enemies out there. Other species who underestimate humanity. Other battles to fight." Sella smiled. "If you do, call me. I would be honored to fight beside you again." Ethan nodded. "I will." He looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. He had been captured, tortured, and nearly broken. But he had survived. He had won. And he had taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo through the centuries. Never underestimate a human. Never mistake patience for weakness. Never assume the battle is won just because the enemy is quiet. Because humans do not give up. They do not surrender. They adapt, they learn, and they keep fighting until the war is won. And that is what makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The ship jumped into hyperspace, carrying Ethan Cole toward his next adventure. Behind him, the Vexery homeworld burned under the light of 100 suns. And somewhere in the darkness of space, other enemies were watching, wondering if the stories they had heard about humanity were true. They were about to find out. The end.